Good evening. Welcome to the Bible Hour, the hour where we read the Bible. It is day 32. Good evening, Park End Church admin. Wow, you even know the verse. Who's on admin tonight? Let me get a tissue and wipe the camera lens just in case. Evening all. Well, Park End admin isn't Neil. Who is the admin tonight? Whoosh. Good evening, Neil. We have 5 minutes to go before we jump on in. Let's get this Bible open. MC Ricky B. Nice. Arguably the best admin. There is a case for it. I've heard the case being made. Arguably Park End's best elder. You can make a case for it. You can make a case. Good evening, Gelfin6969. Good morning, North Star. Four minutes to go. Welcome to the anonymous viewers. Welcome to those who are perhaps watching a few hours after the live stream. Good evening, Phil Tamlin. Mrs. B is laughing untrollably. When one laughs without a troll. And we are in Judges, chapter 14, verse 15. I hope you've all had a good day. Good day, maybe not an easy day, but a good day. We left last night on a cliffhanger. Out of the one who eats came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. What did Samson mean? And tonight's mug is Reverend Batstone. We have 2 minutes to go. Please turn out your Bibles. Judges. We are reading from the New Living Translation, a dynamic equivalent. And we're asking these two questions through everything that we read. So welcome on into the Bible Hour. Just made it, Sue Roberts. Welcome on in. Pull up a chair and a puffy Put your feet up, grab that Bible. Welcome on in if you're new and never been to the Bible Hour before, but perhaps have seen it through advertisements that the Presbyterian Church of Wales have been making. Welcome on in if you've just stumbled upon us on Facebook or YouTube Live. Welcome on in if you've never read the Bible before. May the Lord speak to all of us as we read his word and look at who Jesus is and what he does for his bride, who are in a right state in the book of Judges. Welcome on in, Chris Henry, stumbling in, cup of tea spilling, biscuit half dunked, but she's made it. Good evening, Chris Williams, and no doubt, Cara. No doubt at all in my mind. And it is Joshua 14 verse. No, it's not. It is Judges 14 verse 15. We'll begin in 30 seconds' time. Okay, well, welcome to the Bible Hour, day 32. Links to why we ask these questions in the thing below. We are in the book of Judges. Judges is about the ancient church. Some people call it Israel, but it's church life. Major problems begin if you start thinking that this is some sort of ethnic conquest. This is church as a nation, not ethnicity. We're not dealing with that sort of ethnic takeover. You can join the church from whatever nation you are, but convert to the church nation. The difference, of course, with the New Testament church is we get to remain Welsh, Korean, German, English, Scottish, and join our local churches since Pentecost. But we are dealing here with the church. Before we begin, I would now like to thank a dear friend of mine whose merchandise arrived in the post. I'd like to thank Mr. Mike Freeman. He's not on chat. He can't type. He can't spell very much, but he's a good ambulance man from Swansea. He once asked me to take down one of the walls in his garden, and he gave me a hammer and a chisel. And then towards the end of the 5-hour morning work, he told me that he had an electric drill in his shed. So thank you, Mike Freeman, for this. Oh, there's his wife, Rachel. Thank you both for this mug. A link to the Owen Ferrari Fund will be underneath. Judges chapter 14, verse 15. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Hello, Diane. Out of the one who eats came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet, said Samson. 3 days later, they were still trying to figure that riddle out. Verse 15. On the fourth day, they said to Samson's wife, I don't know if you ever played a board game and it suddenly escalates to the awkward level, and nothing quite escalates this quickly. On the fourth day, they said to Samson's wife, entice your husband to explain the riddle for us, or we will burn down your father's house with you in it. Did you invite us to this party just to make us poor? So Samson's wife came to him in tears and said, you don't love me. You hate me. You have given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer. I haven't even given the answer to my father or mother, he replied. Why should I tell you? So she cried whenever she was with him and kept it up for the rest of the celebration. At last, on the seventh day, he told her the answer because she was tormenting him, tormenting him with her nagging. Then she explained the riddle to the young men. So before sunset of the seventh day, the men of the town came to Samson with their answer. What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? Samson replied, If you hadn't ploughed with my heifer, you wouldn't have solved my riddle. Then the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. He went down to the town of Ashkelon, killed 30 men, took their belongings, and gave their clothing to the men who had solved his riddle. But Samson was furious about what happened, and he went back home to live with his father and mother. So his wife was given in marriage to the man who had been Samson's best man at the wedding. It's not great at the moment in the life of the church. Judges chapter 15. Samson's vengeance on the Philistines. Later on, during the wheat harvest, Samson took a young goat as a present to his wife. He said, I'm going into my wife's room to sleep with her, but her father wouldn't let him in. I truly thought you must hate her, her father explained. So I gave her in marriage to your best man. But look, her younger sister is even more beautiful than she is. Marry her instead. Samson said, This time I cannot be blamed for everything I am going to do to you Philistines. Then he went and caught 300 foxes. He tied their tails together in pairs, and he fastened a torch to each pair of tails. Then he lit the torches and let the foxes run through the grain fields of the Philistines. He burned all their grain to the ground, including the sheaves and the uncut grain. He also destroyed their vineyards and olive groves. Like the judgment, isn't it? You don't just lose body and soul, just everything goes, even your possessions and everything. All is lost outside of Jesus and church. Who did this? The Philistines demanded. Samson, was the reply, because his father-in-law from Timnah gave Samson's wife to be married to his best man. So the Philistines went and got the woman and her father and burned them to death. Because you did this, Samson vowed, I won't rest until I take my revenge on you. So he attacked the Philistines with great fury and killed many of them. Then he went to live in a cave in the rock of Etam. As you do. The Philistines retaliated by setting up camp in Judah and spreading out near the town of Lehi. The men of Judah asked the Philistines, Why are you attacking us? The Philistines replied, We've come to capture Samson. We've come to pay him back for what he did to us, which is what we did to him. And then he did to us, but we started it. So the 3,000 men of Judah went down to get Samson at the cave of the rock of Etam. They said to Samson, Don't you realize the Philistines rule over us? What are you doing to us? But Samson replied, I only did to them what they did to me. But the men of Judah told him, We have come to tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines. Know also the tribe of Judah is now under the thumb of the Philistine pagan demonic gods. All right, Samson said, but promise that you won't kill me yourselves. We will only tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines, they replied. We won't kill you. So they tied him up with 2 new ropes and brought him from the rock. As Samson arrived at Lehi, the Philistines came shouting in triumph. But the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon Samson, and he snapped the ropes on his arms as if they were burned strands of flax, and they fell down from his wrists. Then he found the jawbone of a recently killed donkey. He picked it up and killed 1,000 Philistines with it. Then Samson said, "Yes, this is live, Antichrist Phillies. Welcome on into the Bible Hour. It is day 32 where we ask, what are we learning about Jesus and what are we learning about church? You're 32 days late, but welcome on in. With the jawbone of a donkey, I've piled them in heaps. With the jawbone of a donkey, I've killed 1,000 men. Good evening, Petit Bois." When he finished boasting, "Hey, good evening, MacDonald," he threw away the jawbone, and the place was named Jawbone Hill. Samson was now very thirsty, and he cried out to the Lord, "You have accomplished this great victory by the strength of your servant. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of these pagans?" So God caused water to gush out of a hollow in the ground at Lehi, and Samson was revived as he drank. Who brought the judgment on the pagan nations? The Lord. Then he named that place the spring of the one who cried out, and it is still in Lehi to this day. Samson judged Israel for 20 years during the period when the Philistines dominated the land. Any newcomers, welcome on in. We read the Bible every day from the hour of 9 until 10. We will read all of the Bible in 60 days, which possibly will be longer than 60 days. Get your Burnley shirt back on, says Chris Williams. I did wear my Antichrist Phillies Burnley shirt in a stream a few days ago. Judges chapter 16. Samson carries away Gaza's gates. One day, Samson went to the Philistine town of Gaza and spent the night with a prostitute. Word soon spread that Samson was there, so the men of Gaza gathered together and waited all night at the town gates. They kept quiet during the night, saying to themselves, "When the light of morning comes, we will kill him." Hey, Cara. But Samson stayed in bed only until midnight. Then he got up, took hold of the doors of the town gate, including the 2 posts, and lifted them up, bar and all. He put them on his shoulders and carried them all the way to the top of the hill across from Hebron. Samson and Delilah. Some time later, Samson fell in love with a woman named Delilah, who lived in the valley of Sorek. The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, "Entice Samson to tell you what makes him so strong and how he can be overpowered and tied up securely. Then each of us will give you 1,100 pieces of silver." Doing things for silver never goes down that well in the Bible. 6. So Delilah said to Samson, "Please tell me what makes you so strong and what it would take to tie you up securely." Samson replied, "If I were tied up with 7 new bowstrings that have not yet been dried, I would become as weak as anybody else." So the Philistine rulers brought Delilah 7 new bowstrings, and she tied Samson up with them. She had hidden some men in one of the inner rooms in her house, and she cried out, "Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you." But Samson snapped the bowstrings as a piece of string snaps when it is burned by a fire. So the secret of his strength was not discovered. Afterwards, Delilah said to him, "You've been making fun of me and telling me lies. Now please tell me how you can be tied up securely." Yeah, it's like his fault, isn't it? Samson replied, "If I were tied up with brand new ropes that had never been used, I would become as weak as anybody else." So Delilah took new ropes and tied him up with them. The men were hiding in their inner room as before, and again Delilah cried out, "Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you." But again, Samson snapped the ropes from his arms as if they were a thread. Then Delilah said, "You've been making fun of me and telling me lies. Now tell me how you can be tied up securely." Andy Christofides, I've been missing this. Start again. All right. Well, Andy, you need to be following us on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. But just for you, Genesis chapter 1, day 1. Let's go. No, we can't. Samson replied, "If you were to weave the 7 braids of my hair into the fabric on your loom and tighten it with the loom shuttle, I would become as weak as anybody else." So while he slept, Delilah wove the 7 braids of his hair into the fabric. Then she tightened it with the loom shuttle. Again she cried out, "Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you." Samson woke up, pulled back the loom shuttle, and yanked his hair away from the loom and the fabric. Then Delilah pouted, "How can you... Then Delilah pouted, "How can you tell me I love you when you don't even share your secrets with me?" What I love about the Bible is, and we've said this a few times, creation of the cosmos and world, 3 chapters. Completely messed up marriage life, family life, church life, in the dirt and grit of day-to-day failings, basically 700 chapters just to bring glory to Jesus. Verse 16, she tormented him with her nagging day after day until he was sick to death of it. Finally, Samson shared his secret with her. "My hair has never been cut," he confessed, "for I was dedicated to God as a Nazarite from birth." If you're into Nazarite vows, we went proper deep into it in the Leviticus and Deuteronomy readings. All up on YouTube. We spent a lot of time looking at the Leviticus laws, rituals, feasts and festivals, and explaining them all and how they point to Jesus. It's all there for lockdown, because we're here to redeem lockdown and become more like Jesus. "If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me and I would become as weak as anyone else." Delilah realized he had finally told her the truth, so she sent for the Philistine rulers. "Come back one more time," she said, "for he has finally told me his secret." So the Philistine rulers returned with the money in their hands. Delilah lulled Samson to sleep with his head in her lap, and then she called in a man to shave off the 7 locks of hair. There's that number 7 again. In this way, she began to bring him down, and his strength left him. Then she cried out, "Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you." When he woke up, he thought, "I will do as before and shake myself free." But he didn't realize the Lord had left him. That Nazarite vow, that Nazarite dependence on the Spirit, dedication to God, that is Jesus. Samson couldn't do it anymore. So the Philistines captured him and gouged out his eyes. They took him to Gaza, where he was bound with bronze chains and forced to grind grain in the prison. But before long, his hair began to grow back. Samson's final victory. The Philistine rulers held a great festival, offering sacrifices and praising their god, Dagon. We're going to get to Dagon in a bit, but basically he's just a giant fish god. The worst of gods. They said, "Our God has given us victory over our enemy, Samson." When the people saw him, they praised their God, saying, "Our God has delivered our enemy to us. The one who killed so many of us is now in our power." Half drunk by now, the people demanded, "Bring out Samson so he can amuse us." So he was brought from the prison to amuse them, and they had him stand between the pillars supporting the roof. That amuse us thing. Do you remember a few chapters ago in Joshua when those 5 evil kings were put under the feet of Joshua and he stood on their necks? And we look back to Genesis 3, where the evil one would be put under the foot and he would stand on him. And then we looked at Ephesians 1:22, that all things are put under Jesus's feet and the church's feet. Now look what happens to church when it loses focus on Jesus and gets involved with pagan idols and gods. Now the judge of the church is amusing pagans like a clown. Samson said to the young servant who was leading him by the hand, "Place my hands against the pillar that hold up the temple. I want to rest against them." Now the temple was completely filled with people. All the Philistine rulers were there, and there were about 3,000 men and women on the roof who were watching as Samson amused them. Then Samson prayed to the Lord, "Sovereign Lord, remember me again. Oh God, please strengthen me just one more time. With one blow, let me pay back the Philistines for the loss of my 2 eyes." Then Samson put his hands on the 2 center pillars that held up the temple, pushing against them with both hands. He prayed, "Let me die with the Philistines." And the temple crashed down on the Philistine rulers and all the people. So he killed more people when he died than he had during his entire lifetime. Later, his brothers and other relatives went down to get his body. They took him back home and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol, where his father Manoah was buried. Samson had judged Israel for 20 years. If you want to know about the book of Judges and why it's tragic, we went into it a bit in the first live stream of Judges, so that's up on the channel. And then we looked at Hannah, though, who was praying to the king in heaven when most of the other church weren't and were looking for poxy rubbish rulers to look after them. We also clip anything pertinent into smaller videos, so it's there up for resources now. Judges chapter 17, Micah's idols. There was a man named Micah who lived in the hill country of Ephraim. One day he said to his mother, "I heard you place a curse on the person who stole 1,100 pieces of silver from you. Well, I have the money. I was the one who took it." MacDonald, amazing how God answered Samson's prayer when he was desperate, isn't it? That does seem to happen a lot with our living God. "I was the one who took it." "The Lord bless you for admitting it," his mother replied. He returned the money to her, and she said, "I now dedicate these silver coins to the Lord. In honor of my son, I will have an image carved and an idol cast." So when he returned the money to his mother, she took 200 silver coins and gave them to a silversmith, who made them into an image and an idol. And these were placed in Micah's house. Micah set up a shrine for the idol, and he made a sacred ephod and some household idols. Then he installed one of his sons as a personal priest, just like you do when you completely don't read Moses and Aaron like they should be doing. In those days, Israel had no king. That phrase again. Do you remember Moses, though, as Moses was dying, when he went to the land, the Lord will be your king. It's a tragic statement. In those days, Israel had no king. Well, they did, and Hannah's praying to him. All the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. One day, a young Levite who had been living in Bethlehem in Judah arrived in that area. He had left Bethlehem in search of another place to live, and as he traveled, he came to the hill country of Ephraim. He happened to stop at Micah's house as he was traveling through. "Where are you from?" Micah asked him. He replied, "I am a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, and I am looking for a place to live." "Oh, stay here with me," Micah said, "and you can be a father and a priest to me. And I will give you 10 pieces of silver a year, plus a change of clothes and your food." The Levite agreed to this, and the young man became like one of Micah's sons. So Micah installed the Levite as his own personal priest, and he lived in Micah's house. "I know the Lord will bless me now," Micah said, "because I have a Levite serving as my priest." Church falling into idolatry again. Judges chapter 18. Idolatry in the tribe of Dan. I just find this heartbreaking stuff because of the latter chapters of Joshua, when they get the land and there's peace and they've all got a bit for themselves because church is going to get the land and we're going to get land, and now look what's happening. Now, in those days, Israel had no king. The author, he's telling us what the problem is, isn't he? And the tribe of Dan was trying to find a place where they could settle, for they had not yet moved into the land assigned to them, and the land was divided among the tribes of Israel. So the men of Dan chose from their clans 5 capable warriors from the town of Zorah and Eshtal to scout out the land for them to settle in. When these warriors arrived in the hill country of Ephraim, they came to Micah's house and spent the night there. While at Micah's house, they recognized the young Levite's accent. So they went over and asked him, "Who brought you here? And what are you doing in this place? Why are you here?" Bible Hour crew who was around in Exodus and Leviticus are like, "What is that Levite doing there? We know where he should be. Get back to the tabernacle." He told them about his agreement with Micah and that he had been hired as Micah's personal priest. Then they said, "Ask God whether or not our journey will be successful." "Go in peace," the priest replied, "for the Lord is watching over your journey." So the 5 men went on to the town of Laish, where they noticed the people living carefree lives, like the Sidonians. They were peaceful and secure. The people were also wealthy because their land was very fertile, and they lived a great distance from Sidon and had no allies nearby. When the men returned to Zorah and Eshtal, their relatives asked them, "What did you find?" The men replied, "Come on, let's attack them. We have seen the land and it is very good. What are you waiting for? Don't hesitate to go and take possession of it. When you get there, you will find the people living carefree lives. God has given us a spacious and fertile land, lacking in nothing." So 600 men from the tribe of Dan, armed with weapons of war, set out from Zorah and Eshtal. They camped at a place west of Kiriath Jearim in Judah, which is called Mahanadan to this day. They then went on from there to the hill country of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah. The 5 men who had scouted out the land around Laish explained to the others, "These buildings contain a sacred ephod, as well as some household idols, a carved image, and a cast idol. What do you think you should do?" Then the 5 men turned off the road and went over to Micah's house, where the young Levite lived, and greeted him kindly. As the 600 armed warriors from the tribe of Dan stood at the entrance of the gate, the 5 scouts entered the shrine and removed the carved image, the sacred ephod, the household idols, and the cast idol. Meanwhile, the priest was standing at the gate with the 600 armed warriors. When the priest saw the man carrying the sacred objects out of Micah's shrine, he said, "What are you doing?" "Be quiet and come with us," they said. "Be a father and priest to all of us. Isn't it better to be a priest for an entire tribe and clan of Israel than for a household of just one man?" The young priest was quite happy to go with them, so he took along the sacred ephod, the household idols, and the carved image. They turned and started on their way again, placing their children, livestock, and possessions in front of them. When the people from the tribe of Dan were quite a distance from Micah's house, the people who lived near Micah came chasing after them. They were shouting as they caught up with him. The men of Dan turned around and said to Micah, "What's the matter? Why have you called these men together and chased after us like this?" "What do you mean, what's the matter?" Micah replied. "You've taken away all the gods I have made and my priest, and I have nothing left." The men of Dan said, "Watch what you say. There are some short-tempered men around here who might get angry and kill you and your family." So the men of Dan continued on their way. When Micah saw that there were too many of them for him to attack, he turned around and went home. Then, with Micah's idols and his priest, the men of Dan came down to the town of Laish, whose people were peaceful and secure. They attacked with swords and burned the town to the ground. There was no one to rescue the people, for they lived a great distance from Sidon and had no allies nearby. This happened in the valley near Beth Rehob. Then the people of the tribe of Dan rebuilt the town and lived there. They renamed the town Dan after their ancestor, Israel's son, but it had originally been called Laish. Then they set up the carved image, and they appointed Jonathan, son of Gershom, son of Moses, as their priest. This family continued as priests for the tribe of Dan until the exile. So Micah's carved image was worshipped by the tribe of Dan as long as the tabernacle of God remained at Shiloh. We are at the halfway mark. Take 30 seconds, grab a chair. Well, you should already have a chair by now, but grab a drink, shuffle in your seats, maybe grab some cheese, some crackers, a sausage roll, anything to keep you going for 30 more minutes. For those who had questions about Jephthah's daughter yesterday, we didn't deal with it here because here we try and focus on Jesus and church, but we did post a post on that today on the Park End Facebook page, looking at actually bits of Hebrew as well. So we got quite interesting there. Sam Whittington's, can we see Puppy? I'll have to text my assistant and see about that. Okay, Judges chapter 19. The Levite and his concubine. Now in those days, Israel had no king. Worth asking at this point, is Jesus king of your church? Is it a monarchy like it should be? There was a man from the tribe of Levi living in a remote area of the hill country of Ephraim. Oh dear, I'm finding Judges quite depressing. Yeah, let it. Throw yourself on the captain of the team rather than various members of the team. We win because of the captain, not necessarily the players like us. There was a man from the tribe of Levi living in a remote area of the hill country of Ephraim. One day he brought home a woman from Bethlehem in Judah to be his concubine. But she became angry with him and returned to her father's home in Bethlehem. After about 4 months, her husband set out for Bethlehem to speak personally to her and persuade her to come back. He took with him a servant and a pair of donkeys. When he arrived at her father's house, her father saw him and welcomed him. Her father urged him to stay a while, so he stayed 3 days, eating, drinking, and sleeping there. On the fourth day, the man was up early, ready to leave. But the woman's father said to his son-in-law, "Have something to eat before you go." So the two men sat down together and had something to eat and drink. Then the woman's father said, "Please stay another night and enjoy yourself." The man got up to leave, but his father-in-law kept urging him to stay. So he finally gave in and stayed the night. On the morning of the fifth day, he was up early again, ready to leave. And again, the woman's father said, "Have something to eat. Then you can leave later this afternoon." So they had another day of feasting. Later, as the man and his concubine and servant were preparing to leave, his father-in-law said, "Look, it's almost evening. Stay the night and enjoy yourself. Tomorrow you can get up early and be on your way." But this time the man was determined to leave, so he took his 2 saddled donkeys and his concubine and headed in the direction of Jebus, that is, Jerusalem. It was late in the day when they neared Jebus, and the man's servant said to him, "Let's stop at this Jebusite town and spend the night there." "No," his master said, "we can't stay in this foreign town where there are no Israelites. Instead, we will go on to Gibeah." "Come on, let's try to get as far as Gibeah or Ramah, and we'll spend the night in one of those 2 towns." So they went on. The sun was setting as they came to Gibeah, a town in the land of Benjamin. So they stopped there to spend the night. They rested in the town square, but no one took them in for the night. That evening, an old man came home from his work in the fields. He was from the hill country of Ephraim, but he was living in Gibeah, where the people were from the tribe of Benjamin. When he saw the travelers sitting in the town square, he asked them where they were from and what they were doing and where they were going. "We have been in Bethlehem in Judah," the man replied. "We are on our way to a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim, which is my home. I traveled to Bethlehem and now I'm returning home, but no one has taken us in for the night, even though we have everything we need. We have straw and feed for our donkeys and plenty of bread and wine for ourselves." "You are welcome to stay with me," the old man said. "I will give you anything you might need, but whatever you do, don't spend the night in the square." So he took them home with him and fed the donkeys, and after they washed their feet, they ate and drank together. While they were enjoying themselves, a crowd of troublemakers from the town surrounded the house. They began beating the door and shouting at the old man. "Bring out the man who is staying with you so we can have sex with him." The old man stepped outside to talk to them. Do you remember the promise of Joshua and Moses and the other faithful leaders who said, "If you go down the route of abandoning the Lord's, the other people and their gods will be like a weight around your neck and shackle you"? I think it's happening, isn't it? The old man stepped outside to talk to them. "No, my brothers, don't do such an evil thing, for this man is a guest in my house, and such a thing would be shameful. Here, take my virgin daughter and this man's concubine. I will bring them out to you, and you can abuse them and do whatever you like, but don't do such a shameful thing to this man." But they wouldn't listen to him. So the Levite took hold of his concubine and pushed her out the door. The men of the town abused her all night, taking turns raping her until morning. Finally, at dawn, they let her go. At daybreak, the woman returned to the house where her husband was staying. She collapsed at the door of the house and lay there until it was light. When her husband opened the door to leave, there lay his concubine with her hands on the threshold. He said, "Get up, let's go." But there was no answer. So he put her body on his donkey and took her home. When he got home, he took a knife and cut his concubine's body into 12 pieces. Then he sent one piece to each tribe throughout all the territory of Israel. Everyone who saw it said, "Such a horrible crime has not been committed in all the time since Israel left Egypt." Think about it. What are we going to do? Who is going to speak up? Tragedy. When there is no king in the land of Israel and everyone does what is right in their own eyes, it is tragic. Church today just has to go, don't do what we want to do what Jesus wants to do. There's basically no better testament than that, than the book of Judges. He is good. We are not. I'll tell you one other spicy meatball. In Sodom, remember that story that we read about 3 weeks ago now? Sodom, they also wanted to perform homosexual gang rape. Do you remember that? Now think about this. When Jesus lined up religious people in his day who hated him and rejected him and warned them, it will be more tolerable on the final day of judgment for the city of Sodom than it will be for you if you look at me and go off your own proud religious way and reject me. So, knowing how lovely Jesus is and shaking your fist at him is a worse crime than homosexual gang rape. Now, if that offended people, put it in the chat in Facebook. We'll deal with that tomorrow. But I think that is, if you take Jesus properly, that's what he's saying. Israel's war with Benjamin, Judges chapter 20. Then all the Israelites were united as one man. From Dan in the north to Beersheba in the south, including those from across the Jordan in the land of Gilead, the entire community assembled in the presence of the Lord at Mizpah. The leaders of all the people and all the tribes of Israel, 400,000 warriors armed with swords, took their positions in the assembly of the people of God. Word soon reached the land of Benjamin that the other tribes had gone up to Mizpah. The Israelites then asked how this terrible crime had happened. The Levite, the husband of the woman who had been murdered, said, "My concubine and I came to spend the night in Gibeah, a town that belongs to the people of Benjamin. That night, some of the leading citizens of Gibeah surrounded the house, planning to kill me, and they raped my concubine until she was dead. So I cut her body into 12 pieces and sent the pieces throughout the territory assigned to Israel, for these men have committed a terrible and shameful crime. Now then, all of you, the entire community of Israel, must decide here and now what should be done about this." And all the people rose to their feet in unison and declared, "None of us will return home. No, not even one of us. Instead, this is what we will do to Gibeah. We will draw lots to decide who will attack it. 1/10 of the men from each tribe will be chosen to supply the warriors with food, and the rest of us will take revenge on Gibeah of Benjamin for this shameful thing they have done in Israel." So all the Israelites were completely united, and they gathered together to attack the town. The Israelites sent messages to the tribe of Benjamin saying, "What a terrible thing has been done among you. Give up those evil men, those troublemakers from Gibeah, so we can execute them and purge Israel of this evil." Sin in the life of church is not an isolated thing. It spreads and hurts the whole church because we're so intricately bound together. But the people of Benjamin would not listen. Instead, they came from their towns and gathered at Gibeah to fight the Israelites. In all, 26,000 of their warriors armed with swords arrived in Gibeah to join the 700 elite troops who lived there. Among Benjamin's elite troops, 700 were left-handed, and each of them could sling a rock and hit a target within a hair's breadth without missing. Israel had 400,000 experienced soldiers armed with swords, not counting Benjamin's warriors. Before the battle, the Israelites went to Bethel and asked God which tribe should go first to attack the people of Benjamin. The Lord answered, "Judah is to go first." So the Israelites left early the next morning and camped near Gibeah. Then they advanced towards Gibeah to attack the men of Benjamin. But Benjamin's warriors who were defending the town came out and killed 22,000 Israelites on the battlefield that day. The Israelites encouraged each other and took their positions again at the same place they had fought the previous day. For they had gone up to Bethel and wept in the presence of the Lord until evening. They had asked the Lord, "Should we fight against our relatives from Benjamin again?" The Lord said, "Go out and fight them." So the next day they went out again to fight against the men of Benjamin. But the men of Benjamin killed another 18,000 Israelites, all of whom were experienced with the sword. Then all the Israelites went up to Bethel and wept in the presence of the Lord and fasted until evening. They also brought burnt offerings and peace offerings to the Lord. The Israelites went up seeking direction from the Lord. In those days, the Ark of the Covenant of God was in Bethel, and Phinehas, son of Eleazar and grandson of Aaron, was the priest. The Israelites asked the Lord, "Should we fight against our relatives from Benjamin again, or should we stop?" The Lord said, "Go. Tomorrow I will hand them over to you." So the Israelites set an ambush all around Gibeah. They went out on the third day and took their positions in the same place as before. When the men of Benjamin came out to attack, they were drawn away from the town. As they had done before, they began to kill the Israelites. About 30 Israelites died in the open fields and along the roads, one leading to Bethel and the other leading back to Gibeah. Then the warriors of Benjamin shouted, "We are defeating them as we did before." But the Israelites had planned in advance to run away so that the men of Benjamin would chase them along the roads and be drawn away from the town. When the main group of Israelite warriors reached Baal Tamar, they turned and took up their positions. Meanwhile, the Israelites hiding in ambush to the west of Gibeah jumped up to fight. There were 10,000 elite Israelite troops who advanced against Gibeah. The fighting was so heavy that Benjamin didn't realize the impending disaster. So the Lord helped Israel defeat Benjamin. And that day, the Israelites killed 25,100 of Benjamin's warriors, all of them who were experienced swordsmen. Then the men of Benjamin saw that they were beaten. The Israelites had retreated from Benjamin's warriors in order to give those hiding in ambush more room to maneuver against Gibeah. Then those who were hiding rushed in from all sides and killed everyone in the town. They had arranged to send up a large cloud of smoke from the town as a signal. When the Israelites saw the smoke, they turned and attacked Benjamin's warriors. By the time Benjamin's warriors had killed about 30 Israelites, they shouted, "We're defeating them as we did in the first battle." But when the warriors of Benjamin looked behind them and saw the smoke rising to the sky from every part of the town, the men of Israel turned and attacked. At this point, the men of Benjamin became terrified because they realized disaster was close at hand. So they turned around and fled before the Israelites toward the wilderness. But they couldn't escape the battle, and the people who came out of the nearby towns were also killed. The Israelites surrounded the men of Benjamin and chased them relentlessly, finally overtaking them east of Gibeah. That day, 18,000 of Benjamin's strongest warriors died in battle. The survivors fled into the wilderness towards the rock of Rimmon, but Israel killed 5,000 of them along the road. They continued to chase and kill till they had killed another 2,000 near Gidom. So that day, the tribe of Benjamin lost 25,000 strong warriors armed with swords, leaving only 600 men who escaped to the rock of Rimmon, where they lived for 4 months. And the Israelites returned and slaughtered every living thing in the town, the people, the livestock, and everything they found. They also burned down all the towns they came to. Yeesh. I wonder that God stayed faithful to them. It is the story of world history. Why Jesus gives his life for the bride, why he perseveres with her. It brings it home that the lengths the living God has gone to throughout history to keep us as a church. All right, we're into the final 10 minutes. He also made a covenant, did our Lord. A promise. Petit bois, too much killing. Judges is a big one, isn't it? Judges chapter 21. Hello? Jesus, if we look at someone with hate, we basically murder them. So there's still a lot of killing going on in church life between the people of God. Still civil wars going on there. Israel provides wives for Benjamin. The Israelites had vowed at Mizpah, we will never get... Rachel Freeman, that husband as good as killed his wife. Yeah. The Israelites had vowed at Mizpah, we will never give our daughters in marriage to a man from the tribe of Benjamin. Now the people went to Bethel and sat in the presence of God until evening, weeping loudly and bitterly. O Lord, God of Israel, they cried out, why has this happened in Israel? Now one of our tribes is missing from Israel. We know, don't we, Bible Hour? They turned from the Lord. They didn't want his reign. Then they got really horny, and sexual sin, as ever, caused massive idolatry and eruptions. Verse 4. Early the next morning, the people built an altar and presented their burnt offerings and peace offerings on it. Then they said, who among the tribes of Israel did not join us at Mizpah when we held our assembly in the presence of the Lord? At that time, they had taken a solemn oath in the Lord's presence, vowing that anyone who refused to come would be put to death. The Israelites felt sorry for their brother Benjamin and said, today one of the tribes of Israel has been cut off. How can we find wives for the few of them who remain, since we have sworn by the Lord not to give them our daughters in marriage? Hold on, something's making a funny noise. Let me turn this off. Hold on. There we go. Verse 8. So they asked, who among the tribes of Israel did not join us at Mizpah when we assembled in the presence of the Lord? And they discovered that no one from Jabesh Gilead had attended the assembly. For after they counted all the people, no one from Jabesh Gilead was present. So the assembly sent 12,000 of their best warriors to Jabesh Gilead with orders to kill everyone there, including women and children. This is what you are to do, they said. Completely destroy all the males and women who are not a virgin. Among the residents of Jabesh Gilead, they found 400 young virgins who had never slept with a man, and they brought them to the camp at Shiloh in the land of Canaan. The Israelite assembly sent a peace delegation to the remaining people of Benjamin who were living in the rock of Rimmon. Then the men of Benjamin returned to their homes, and the 400 women of Jabesh Gilead who had been spared were given to them as wives. But they were not enough women for all of them. The people felt sorry for Benjamin because the Lord had made his gap among the tribes. Because the Lord had made this gap among the tribes of Israel. So the elders of the assembly asked, how can we find wives for the few who remain, since the women of the tribe of Benjamin are dead? There must be heirs for the survivors so that an entire tribe of Israel is not wiped out. But we cannot give them our own daughters in marriage because we have sworn with a solemn oath that anyone who does this will fall under God's curse. Then they thought of the annual festival the Lord held in Shiloh, south of Lebonah and north of Bethel, along the east side of the road that goes from Bethel to Shechem. They told the men of Benjamin who still needed wives, go and hide in the vineyards. When you see the young women of Shiloh coming out for their dances, rush out from the vineyards, and each of you can take one of them home to the land of Benjamin to be your wife. And when their fathers and brothers come to protest, we will tell them, please be sympathetic. Let them have your daughters, for we didn't find wives for all of them when we destroyed Jabesh Gilead. And you are not guilty of breaking the vow, since you did not actually give your daughters to them in marriage. So the men of Benjamin did as they were told. Each man caught one of the women as she danced in the celebration and carried her off to be his wife. They returned to their own land and they rebuilt their towns and lived in them. Then the people of Israel departed by tribes and families, and they returned to their own homes. In those days, Israel had no king. All the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. We close the Bible Hour with that tragic note and that pressing question. Is this God-man our Lord? Does he have the say in our lives? Look what we are capable of as a church. Tomorrow at 9 o'clock, we will begin the book of Ruth. We are plowing through the Word of God. Remember to check our uploads. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.